All right, let me bring it to our table right now. Richard Brodsky, former New York Assemblyman, senior fellow at Demos, professor at NYU. I could go on. Dominic Carter, political journalist, author. Richard St. Paul, Republican strategist and former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association, and Andrew Whitman, who you met. We were having this debate before as to whether or not it's Monday morning quarterbacking, some of the questions for the intelligence community, or that there was a failure to connect the dots here. And you've got a lot of lawmakers, bipartisan, who are already issuing criticisms of the feds here, that this guy should have been on the radar, and at the very least they should have alerted the Russians when he went back in his last visit to Chechnya.
Give me a break. I mean, that they didn't catch him is regrettable. That would have been better. But the notion that the system failed because they didn't nail this guy is like blaming Dwight Eisenhower for the casualties on D-Day. The system was up. The system is not foolproof. There are always going to be these kinds of things. The FBI did a reasonably competent job, and we are much better off looking not at the guys who are policing the system, but what it is we can do to stop these kinds of incidents once on the ground in ways that we can learn some lessons from in this thing. Blaming the FBI is short-term stuff.
Well, Dominic, obviously the facts are still fluid in this thing. We may find out. There's been mixed reporting whether or not the Russians were cooperative from the last time. But given the heads up that they originally gave us, at the very least, should there have been a phone call to say he's on the flight manifest, he's going over to Russia, he was a person of interest for these guys before, with detailed concerns about cooperation or interest, that is, with some radicalized elements, should there at least have been a phone call from Quantico over to Russia saying he's on his way?
Phone call, and he should have been a person of interest. I disagree with Richard. And the reason why, I know law enforcement over the last week, national law enforcement, local law enforcement, did an outstanding job. But, and I know the FBI is not the NYPD, but if we are spying on students on a whitewater rafting trip that attend City College, and if you're red flagged by the FBI, and then you're making these questionable postings on your YouTube site, I mean, what else more do you need to red flag?
But Dominic, you don't support what the NYPD did in that stop and frisk case, or in the by targeting Muslims outside of New York City.
My point is that if we're going to be that diligent and that strong in terms,
you don't want that.
Okay, I didn't say whether I want it or not, but it's still being done.
Oh, please.
It's still being done. It's being done in Boston,
New
York.
We've criticized that very activity.
But whether we criticize it or not is completely irrelevant. It's still being done, or it was being done. And so if we're going to cast a wide net on young college students, how come this guy was able to fall through the cracks?
I agree. I'm not so quick to let the FBI off the hook. I mean, we've seen their mistakes in 9/11. The commission report talked about the FBI and the CIA not communicating, not picking up on clues. What's to say the FBI didn't mess up now? It's still early. There needs to be an investigation on what the FBI knew, when they knew it, how they handled the information. Let that be investigated first before we draw the conclusion on whether or not the FBI is off the hook.
You're a Republican?
Yes.
That was good.
Richard, here's what I just am not sure about. What should the level of expectation be in a post-9/11 world when a terror concern has been raised about someone?
There's a balance to be struck. We want to do investigations. We want to make sure people are being checked out, but we don't want to have every posting, every kid in college, Big Brother looking down the back of his shirt. The fact of the matter is that in a war like this, or a conflict like this, there's always going to be the guy who slips through the cracks. That's not a criticism of the guys who did the investigation. The FBI went out there, did 2 interviews with him, thought it through, looked around at his postings, and said, we don't have enough to do anything but watch the guy.
And that's where the responsibility ends, or should they at least alert, in this particular case, the people who alerted to us in the first place were the Russians?
The Russians would have done something, wouldn't have done anything about what would happen when he came back. In the end,
Tom,
I'm violating my own law here, which is keep your mouth shut until you know what you're talking about. But I do think that the outbursts of criticism, look, we have guys calling for torture. Now there's a lot of wackiness out there, and the advice I got from my friend is well taken.
But we didn't have enough. The FBI didn't have enough to launch a formal investigation, and so now we are Monday morning quarterbacking, saying we don't like the results.
Except the one part that the only part I disagree with, Andrew, is let's assume that they did follow SOP, they did the right investigations. There was a phone call, I think, or at least an alert owed to Russia to say, this guy that you guys declared and alerted us to, he's on his way back here, and
You're missing a step, though. This guy who you alerted us to, who we had no reason to start a formal investigation against, I mean, do you want us to notify every foreign country every time somebody who we're not investigating is traveling to that country?
you're conflating a lot.
I'm absolutely not.
I think
the
that-
FBI looked into it, said that there's not enough to start an investigation against this guy.
I'm not asking to call Burma here. I'm saying if the Russians called us and tipped them off a
concern for the
year
Russians
ago.
is touching.
Thank
Listen,
you.
I think to the point, to your point, Richard, yes, this guy should have been watched. I mean, how do you make bombs? I mean, he's on the internet making bombs, potentially, right? Why are we looking at him? Why wasn't he still under investigation? I mean, the fact that you get how often do you get a call
You're violating
from?
your
It's
own
got to
rule.
be the
No,
same
but he
standard.
still definitely should have been on the watch
It's got to be the same
list.
standard that applies to you, that applies to me, that applies to these guys.
Well, how often
it
do you
has
get
to
a
be a
call
certain level, a
From the
threshold.
SSB and Russia saying, "Hey, watch this guy." I mean, how often does that happen? I don't know, but
I don't know.
I
how
would
often
think
it
you should
happens.
take it
But
seriously
again, that
and keep
wasn't
track
the,
of this
That
person.
wasn't the end of it. The FBI
They did.
they got
went out
into it and they
interviewed
said
him.
we
They should
don't
keep
have
track
enough.
of him.
Why? Because his last name sounds
little
slightly
bit more than
Arabic.
that, Andrew.
Oh,
I mean,
exactly.
it's either we have enough to look into these things or we don't. In this case, we didn't, and now we're after the fact saying,
Well, you know
boy,
what?
we
I
should have
think-
because look at what happened
I
in the
think
future.
Richard Strangely made a good point, which is you like
Which
that,
one?
which is we still don't have all the facts that are coming out. But even in the absence of facts, a lot of legal questions have emerged. And when we come back from the break, we're going to be talking about some of those sticky legal issues, including now that we got some guy in custody, how do we treat him? Is he a citizen? Is he an enemy combatant here? And does he get Miranda rights? Well, how about torture, like one New York lawmaker said? We're going to get into all of that here, and we want you to sound off as well. Go to Facebook and Twitter. We'll get into that reaction right after this.